Building a budget Ryzen Gaming PC that can double as a productivity monster is a lot easier and cheaper than one would think. So on top of showing you where to find these parts, I'm going to show you step by step on how to put together this hybrid gaming beast that leaves you or puts you right under the $300 mark, but leaves you room plenty for upgrades. But before we jump in, this video is served up courtesy of the subscribe button and notification bell. Be sure to hit them both on your way out. First up, you have the Gigabyte B450M DS3H Micro ATX motherboard. I'm going to go ahead and unbox it now. For the CPU, we're going with the Ryzen 3 2200G, which has onboard graphics, Radeon 8 graphics that will drive home some pretty good 720p or 900p and maybe even 1080p low setting gaming. Again, this platform will leave you room for upgrades if you want to upgrade to, say, a Ryzen 5 2600, but more on that later. Okay, so it might be a little difficult for the camera to pick up, but there's a triangle right here in the corner of the socket. And you pull the lever back, get the CPU ready. You'll see there's a little triangle here on the corner of the CPU, and then very gently you want to go ahead and drop the CPU in there, make sure it's nice and snug, and drop the lever down. CPU installed. Next up, we have some memory. So when you're installing your memory, you want to consult with your manual, but essentially these sockets are numbered. So this is DDR1, DDR2, DDR3, and DDR4. Since we're going with dual channel RAM here, 2 sticks of 4 gigs, so 8 gigs in total, we're going to be installing them into DIMMs 1 and DIMMs 2. You're going to take the tooth right there, that little slot, make sure it's lined up with the groove. Give it a firm press down until you hear that snap. Just do the same thing. Memory installed. Next, we're going to be installing the cooler that came with the Ryzen 3 2200G. Wanted to mention that the thermal paste comes pre-applied onto this cooler, which I have some Noctua coolers somewhere that I just used on the test bed, but for this use case scenario, the thermal paste that's already applied from the factory should suffice for this setup. And then the most important component, arguably, in any system is the power supply unit. Now, a nifty tool to use in your arsenal while shopping is PCPartPicker.com, and I'll put a link in the description to the PC part picker list for this particular build, and its Intel counterpart that really couldn't be built at a similar price point. It's a little more expensive, about $100 premium. Corsair VS 450 watt power supply, 80 plus rated for maximum efficiency. It's going to give you low noise and, well, while not fully modular, at least gives you some nice sleeving on the cables. What we're going to do is I'm going to connect everything outside of the case, and one reason why you might want to do that is to check to make sure all the components are functioning properly, turning on, and everything is showing up correctly in the BIOS. Once I do that and everything checks and looks good, we're going to go ahead and put everything inside the chassis and get Windows installed. 24-pin connector, which is almost always on the right side of the motherboard, and you're going to take that. Press it down till you feel a good snap, let you know it's in there, it's secured properly. Then you have the 8-pin CPU power connector. So look on your power supply. They're almost always marked on the side right there to let you know, what cable fastens to what connector. The two most important connectors are plugged in onto your motherboard: your 24-pin power connector and your 8-pin CPU power connector. You have your SATA cable, which is used to transfer data from the motherboard to the SSD or hard drive, or any peripheral for that matter. Then, speaking of hard drive, we're going to go with a 240 gigabyte storage, and what this is going to serve as a Windows boot drive. Next, what you want to do is you want to make sure you are installing the SATA cable to the motherboard in the highest, most top SATA port. Connect your SATA cable to the SSD. There's two spots on the SSD. The smaller connector is for the SATA, the larger one is for power from the power supply. We're going to plug in the power supply unit, hook up the HDMI and any other peripherals, and make sure she powers on, or give it a first test boot. Alright, so you can see here we're in the BIOS. Everything looks good. Alright, so you see here we have our CPU frequency. It says 3500 megahertz. That's actually 3.5 gigahertz. Temperature 29C. So CPU, the cooler paces. Not sure how to. As you can see, our voltage is at 1.2 voltage. Memory 2133. That's DDR4 default. Now, when you're running Ryzen, what you want to do is you always want to make sure you are running the fastest possible XMP or memory overclock profile. You want to get the most out of your DDR4. In most cases, it's a simple click and switch in the BIOS. We have our SSD SanDisk 240 gigabyte shown here. For the first boot option, we're actually going to install Windows on there. So everything looks good. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and unplug the power supply unit and fasten it down in the case and get Windows installed. An underrated step most people tend to forget to do, and that's install your I/O shield, which goes inside of there, and it just makes everything look cool and whatnot. So. Motherboard's installed, so we're going to go ahead and install the power supply unit. Just going to drop it in right there. Alright, as you can see now, we have the motherboard. Yeah, the motherboard's installed, CPU cooler's installed, two 4 gigabyte sticks, 8 gigabyte total of RAM, and the Corsair VS 450 watt power supply. Everything's installed and mounted to the chassis. What we're going to do next is do some mild cable management and go ahead and get Windows installed. there you have it. This Ryzen budget busting gaming PC is all set up and good to go. With the future investment of between $200 to $300, you can significantly boost performance with this system by adding a second generation or Zen Plus based CPU like a Ryzen 5 2600 and a discrete card somewhere along the lines of an RX 550 or RX 570. Other than that, Lab Rats, that'll be all for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're a first-time viewer, thanks for stopping by today and checking out this video. I hope you consider subscribing to the channel on your way out and even liking this video if you liked it. Other than that, that'll be all. I hope to see you all in the next one. Until then, be easy.